She whispered, "I'll warm your bed, human. My children need a father." I couldn't close the door, asterisk. The storm didn't knock, it roared. Snow flung itself sideways across the frozen sky, smashing into the metal and stone sides of Elrich. Ward's cabin with the fury of something alive and starving. The wind howled through the vents, shrieking like a mourning beast, icing over the solar array and battering the structure with relentless rhythm. The walls groaned. Even the reinforced. Shutters creaked beneath the weight of the white void outside. Inside, the only steady sound was the faint buzz of the heat core. It hummed in quiet defiance of the blizzard, casting flickering orange light against cold stone. Shadows danced across the walls, stretching long and restless. Elrich sat in silence by the burner, broad shoulders hunched, hands wrapped around. A cup of tea long gone cold. He hadn't sipped it. He rarely did. These days, tea was less for drinking and more for remembering that his hands still had purpose. Silence. Out here was not peace. It was pressure. It was the weight of absence. The absence of orders, of comrades, of his daughter's laugh, of a war that had ended but never left him. Elrich had come to Veltuan 5 to disappear, to bury the things that followed him. The metals, the graves, the sound of his wife's voice when she said she couldn't wait anymore. Silence didn't scream back. That had been the draw, but tonight even silence was heavy. He stared at the coat rack. Hanging from it, dust-covered, and nearly forgotten, was a fraying satchel military issue. 20 years old, the clasp rusted. The insignia burned half off during the siege of Calais. Without fully understanding why, he stood, crossed the room, and unfastened it. Inside, a photograph. 4 soldiers, 3 men and 1 woman, all grinning, all alive. He was the one on the left, younger, scarless, rifle across, his chest like it weighed nothing. 2 of them he had buried. The third he'd held while the man bled out in his lap, whispering apologies that neither of them would live long enough to forget. Noise cut through the storm, got the wind, not thunder. A knock got Elrich froze. The photograph still in his hand. Then another knock, barely audible, followed by a dull thump, like something had fallen against the door. He was moving before he knew it. Coat slung over his shoulders, revolver off the wall. Instincts firing like old circuits, snapping to life. There were no neighbors on Veltuan 5, no travelers, no patrols. Anyone knocking meant trouble. He cracked the door open, and his breath caught. 3 figures stood against the white-out blizzard. The wind clawed at them, shrieking, trying to rip them away. But they stood firm. A woman, tall, thin, shaking. Her skin was pale blue, stretched too tightly over sharp cheekbones. Her white hair whipped around her like torn silk, tangled with frost. Her golden eyes blinked hard against the storm dot. At her legs clung 2 children. A boy, no older than 6, shielding the smaller one, maybe 4, with his own shaking body. Both blue-skinned like their mother, both barefoot. Both gaunt. Elrich didn't speak. Couldn't. Then the woman did. Her voice was ragged, as if it hurt to form the words. But they were clear. "I will warm your bed, human ... My children need a father." She didn't say it with seduction, or hope. She said it with desperation. Not a plea, a surrender. Elrich blinked, stunned. The boy looked up, lips cracked and blue. His voice trembled in halting common. "We haven't eaten in 2 sons." But Mama said someone kind would help. Elrich's eyes dropped to the girl. She stared up at him, not crying, not afraid, just curious. "Do you have soup, mister?" she asked. Mama said, "Warmth comes from kind people." That did it. The revolver lowered. Elrich stepped aside, voice hoarse. "Get in." "Now." The woman hesitated just a moment. Then she nudged the children forward. They stumbled inside, collapsing near the heater in a tangled knot of limbs and exhaustion. The woman entered last. She didn't look at Elrich. She didn't say another word. He shut the door behind her. Locked. The storm back outside Dot, but inside, something far more dangerous had entered Hope. And for the first time in years, Erich Ward didn't feel alone. He felt responsible. Asterisk the storm hadn't lessened by morning. If anything, it had deepened, pressing snow against the windows until the world outside looked like frozen smoke. The sky was gone. The trees were gone. Even the antenna was buried somewhere beneath a white silence that clawed at the walls like a patient beast. Inside, the heater hummed steadily. And for once, it wasn't the loudest sound in the room. The children were asleep on a pile of Erich's old blankets near the burner, their thin limbs wrapped around each other like vines. The boy Shello, he thought he'd heard her say, kept one arm across his sister's side even in sleep, like a sentinel refusing to stand down. The girl, Tiva, lay curled up with her small hand resting over her mouth, breathing softly. Elrich sat at the table with a cup of reheated stew, though he wasn't eating. He watched the woman across the room. She hadn't slept. She'd lain down, sure, curled on the floor with her back to the room, her knees drawn to her chest, her threadbare blanket doing little against the cold. But her eyes had stayed open. He'd seen them reflecting the firelight. Now she was sitting up, arms crossed over her knees, golden eyes tracking his every movement, not with fear, but caution, like someone who had survived by knowing when to run. "You should eat," Elrich said, voice rough from disuse. She didn't move. For a second, he thought she hadn't heard. Then she shifted, slowly, and crossed the room to sit across from him, not close, not far, just careful. He slid the bowl toward her. She took it in both hands like it was made of glass. Steam curled around her face. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from cold and starvation. She sipped too quickly and coughed once, clearing her throat. Then she slowed, ate like someone who wasn't sure if the food would vanish mid-bite. "My name is Matsari," she said at last. Elrich nodded. "Elrich, I know." That pulled his eyes up. He frowned. "The outpost files weren't encrypted," she said, her voice quiet. "Before the evacuation, I read what I could. One human stayed behind. Elrich Warg. Ex-military, reclusive, caution advised." His brow twitched. "That was years ago." She nodded. "But you're still here." He leaned back in his chair, gaze flicking to the sleeping children. "You came looking for me?" "No," she said, and this time her eyes softened, just slightly. "I came looking for somewhere the storm wouldn't find us." That answer sat between them for a long moment. "I'm hiding," she added, almost as an afterthought. "Not running. Not anymore. Just hiding." Elrich stood without. A word, moved to the cupboard, and poured her a cup of heated water. He handed it to her carefully. Her fingers brushed his, and though she flinched instinctively, she didn't pull away. "What happened?" he asked, not like a soldier demanding a report. Just a tired man trying to understand another tired soul. She stared into her stew. "My mate died during the war. We were bonded. That means more than marriage where I'm from. When he was gone, I wasn't whole anymore. Not in their eyes." He said nothing. "I tried to raise them alone. I bartered. I worked, but a woman alone, with offspring in my province. We're not protected." Her voice cracked slightly. She took a breath. "The laws said I was an invitation. They said no meant delay. They said my children would be better off forgetting me." Her hands tightened around the bowl. "That's why I said what I said at your door," she whispered. Not because I wanted to, because it worked before. Her eyes met his now, unflinching, unashamed. I'm sorry. Elrich exhaled, not with anger, just something heavier than air. Don't be. Behind them, a small voice broke the silence. Is there more soup, mister? Tiva stood near the heat core, wrapped in one of Elrich's old thermals. Her white hair stuck up like static. Her tiny feet curled against the floor dot without hesitation. Elrich stood, filled a bowl, and handed it to her. She beamed like he'd offered her a crown. Matsari rushed over, crouching beside her. Slow, Tiva, it's hot. I'll blow on it, she promised, then looked up at Elrich. Can I call you Papa? He froze. If you say no, she added solemnly, I'll wait until you say yes. Matsari looked horrified. Tiva, but... Elrich knelt beside the girl. His eyes met hers. You can call me whatever makes you feel warm. She nodded like it was decided, then sat by the fire, humming to her bowl-dot cello, stirred now, blinking. When he saw Elrich, he sat straighter. She... bothering you? He asked sharply. She asks a lot of questions. She's fine, Elrich said. You hungry? The boy hesitated, then nodded once. Elrich turned toward the kitchen without waiting for a reply. Matsari was still watching him, her expression unreadable. She didn't just mean the scar, she said quietly. When she said you had cracks. He looked back. She meant the inside ones too. Elrich paused, but he didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, he ladled out another bowl of stew dot, and for the first time in years, his cabin wasn't silent dot, it was full. It was warm dot, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Asterisk. The storm outside had quieted overnight, but the cold remained a heavy silence wrapped in snow. Morning on Veltuan 5 didn't come with sunrise, just a pale gray that bled through the frosted windows like breath on glass. Elrich Ward stood near the small viewport, sipping bitter coffee from a tin cup, watching the sky do absolutely nothing. No sun, no clouds, just the endless smear of ash-colored stillness. Behind him, the cabin was beginning to stir. Small feet padded across the floor. He didn't need to turn. I wanted to say good morning to the warm thing first. Tiva mumbled sleepily. She shuffled up beside the heater, dragging a blanket behind her like a second shadow. Her fingers touched the metal surface reverently. It keeps us safe, she whispered, so I say thank you. Elrich stared at her, a lump rising in his throat. That heater had once kept him alive in nights when he wasn't sure he wanted to be. Now a child treated it like a guardian spirit. Maybe she was right. Matsari appeared next, quiet as always. Her movements were fluid, controlled like someone who never wanted to take up more space than permitted. Her white hair had been pulled back into a loose braid, but strands had come undone during sleep. She wore one of his old shirts now, sleeves rolled up over her forearms. It hung loosely on her, but somehow it suited her better than the rags she'd arrived in. Elrich poured her a mug of hot water without speaking dot. She accepted it with a soft, thank you, her voice dry but steady. Across the room, cello stirred, grimacing as he swung his legs over the cot. He didn't cry out, didn't groan, but Elrich saw the tightness in his jaw as the boy tested his frost-bitten toes, still sore. You shouldn't walk too much yet, Elrich said as he knelt beside him, already reaching for the medkit. Skins. Still healing. I can still help, cello said flatly. Elrich said nothing at first. He focused on carefully removing the wrappings. The skin was pinker than it had been. Less gray. Healing, but slow. I'm not weak, cello added quickly. Elrich paused, then looked him in the eye. You walked through a storm to protect your sister, he said. You're the strongest person in this cabin. But even the strongest need Time to heal. Cello clenched his fists, trying not to let the words hit too hard. But Elrich saw the way his shoulders trembled, the way his lip quivered before he caught it. What if I stop being useful? The boy whispered. Elrich sat back, stunned by the weight of that question. You're not here because you're useful, he said finally, voice low. You're here because this place is better with you in it. That's enough. Cello looked away, swallowing hard. But he didn't argue. That was victory enough. Later that morning, the scent of porridge filled the cabin. Thin, yes, stretching. Rations wasn't an art. It was survival, but warm and real. Elrich served 4 bowls, placing them on the table with a grunt. Tiva wrinkled her nose. Is it soup day again? No, Elrich said. Porridge, she blinked. It smells like feet. It smells like warmth, Matsari corrected gently. It smells like the outpost shuttle. And that was full of feet, Tiva clarified, climbing onto the bench beside Cello with her doll in hand. Cello was already carving again. A figure this. Time crudely shaped, but unmistakable. It had a long slash down the cheek. Elrich didn't ask. Mazari set bowls before her children, then took her own and settled opposite Elrich. They ate in silence. Not the kind that weighed on them like before, but the kind that felt earned. Comfortable. Present. When breakfast was over, Matsari hummed as she cleaned the dishes. A soft tune in her native language, lilting and strange but gentle. Tiva joined in, off-key but enthusiastic. Elrich dried dishes beside her, their arms brushing occasionally in the narrow space between sink and counter. She didn't flinch anymore. When? Their fingers touched while exchanging a bowl. Neither pulled away. You gave us a day that asked for nothing, she said softly, drying her hands. No danger, no running, no proving we deserve to stay. You don't have to prove anything, Elrich replied. Not here. She looked at him, eyes golden and steady. I believe you now. Across the room, Tiva raised her doll proudly. Look. She has a dress now. I used your old sock. Matsari turned, halfway horrified. Which sock? The blue one, Tiva grinned. With the hole. It was itchy for you, but perfect for her soul. Elrich chuckled. It was underperforming anyway. Matsari covered her mouth to hide her laughter, but it was real. It reached her eyes. The day passed quietly. No alarms, no ration counts. Just small, beautiful nothings, scrubbing old tools, painting rocks with melted crayon wax, carving tiny wooden faces. They didn't talk about yesterday, or the day before that, or what might come tomorrow. As the sun dipped behind the heavy white horizon, Elrich leaned back in his chair and watched the 3 of them sit by the heater laughing, telling stories, drawing warmth from something more than fire. And for the first time in years, he let the silence settle over him without flinching. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full, and he didn't want it to end. Asterisk. The heater clicked softly as the temperature dipped with the coming night, but the cabin no longer felt cold. Not truly. The warmth now came from more than machinery and stone. It pulsed in quiet moments, in the hush of breath and laughter, in the presence of others who no longer looked ready to flee. Elrich sat near the fire sharpening one of the old tools. His eyes drifted from the blade to the makeshift cradle of blankets where Tiva now slept, her small hand curled around her doll's frayed sock dress. Cello lay close by, one hand resting protectively against his sister's back, his wooden carving tucked near his chest. Their breathing was even, peaceful. Matsari hadn't joined them yet. She lingered in the corner, arms wrapped around herself, her back to the room, her silhouette lit in profile by the flickering glow. She looked like she was bracing for something. Elrich finally spoke, voice low. You don't have to stay on the edge, you know. Matsari didn't turn around. Her voice came after a beat, quiet but firm. I'm not used to being allowed in. She shifted, just slightly, as if weighing his presence in the room. Then she moved. Not quickly, carefully. She crossed the cabin floor barefoot and sat on the floor near the fire, folding her legs beneath her. I said something to you the night we arrived, she said, not looking at him. Something ugly. He didn't respond. Let the silence fill with her own rhythm. I told you I'd warm your bed, because my children needed a father. Now she looked at him. No shame in her eyes, only exhaustion, etched deep. That wasn't a bargain, not truly. It was. Desperation and memory. It worked before. Elrich's jaw tensed. It shouldn't have, he said flatly. It shouldn't have, she echoed. Another long pause. Then, I was bonded once, Matsari continued, to a soldier. My mate. Our kind, when we bond, it's not just emotion. It's biological, deep, permanent. Elrich's breath caught at the weight of her tone. She wasn't recounting history. She was unearthing something still raw. When he died, she said, it wasn't just grief. It was like waking up hollow. Broken. Not in pieces, just missing something essential. And where I'm from, that makes you dangerous. She drew a line down her arm with her finger, absently. An unbonded widow with children is considered incomplete, defective. A woman without a mate is treated like an unstable system, one mistake away from collapse, especially if she refuses to rebond. Her voice stayed calm, too calm. The first man didn't ask. The second said I owed him. The third said my children would be safer if I disappeared. Elrich's fingers tightened around the tool in his hand. So we disappeared, she said simply. Found an old access point. In the evac records. A cabin. A soldier. Alone. No patrols. Caution advised. She offered a faint smile. That sounded safer than the cities. You came here thinking I'd be like them, Elrich said quietly. I came here thinking you might understand, she corrected. Someone who left the world behind, who knew what it meant to carry silence like a wound. He looked at her now, not with suspicion, but understanding. The kind that passed between people who no longer had the strength to lie. I didn't stay out here because I wanted solitude, he said. I stayed because I didn't know how to come back. Matsari studied his face, the faint scar down his cheek, the way he sat stiffly, like any softness might be mistaken for. Weakness. You had a daughter, she said gently. He nodded, eyes distant. Lyra, she was 6. He took a breath, held it, exhaled through his nose. I left on what was supposed to be a short deployment, 3 weeks. She asked me to bring her a red moon stone. Said she wanted to keep it under her pillow, for dreams. He swallowed hard. By the time the message got through, I was too far. Combs were buried. I missed her by 6 hours. Matsari didn't offer empty condolences. She simply listened. My wife. She left, he added. Couldn't take it. I don't blame her. I wasn't a man worth waiting for anymore. Matsari leaned forward slightly, the fire casting warm lines across her face. I carried my mate's body back myself, she said. They told me to leave him, that I was risking my children, that I wasn't fit to grieve properly. I didn't. Let go when they told me to, and they hated me for it. Elrich met her eyes. They weren't glassy or wet. They were clear. I'm still grieving, she said, but I'm not alone anymore. She reached out, fingers lightly brushing the edge of the scar on his cheek, tracing it like it was a map. You didn't fail her, she whispered. You loved her. That's not failure. That's proof. His breath caught. She would have been proud of the man who opened his door to strangers. She said, who wrapped a child's arm, who gave his only sock to a doll. That drew a sound from Elrich, a breath between a laugh and a sigh. I don't know how to stop carrying it, he admitted. You don't, she replied, but you can share it, and when you do, it's lighter. He leaned forward slightly, forehead resting against hers. She didn't flinch. You're not what I expected, he said. Neither are you. From the blankets behind him, Tiva's voice piped up sleepily. Are you kissing? Matsari pulled back, surprised. Yes, sweet one, we were. Does that mean you're married now? No, Matsari said with a smile. It means we care about each other. Oh, Tiva nodded wisely. That's even better. Cello's voice drifted from the shadows. You owe me 3 biscuits if they kiss again before morning. I do not, Tiva whispered. Elrich laughed. Not a grunt, not a snort. A real laugh, uncoiled, alive. Matsari leaned into his side, her hand curling around his palm, their fingers twining naturally. And for the first time since Lyra died, Elrich Ward didn't feel like a man made of scars. He felt like someone beginning again. Asterisk, the days had begun to stretch longer, subtly, almost imperceptibly. The snow still covered most of the world beyond the cabin, but it no longer screamed at the windows. The storms had eased into silence, not the hollow kind that haunted Elrich Ward for years, but a thicker, gentler quiet that held rather than echoed. It was the kind of silence one shared, rather than ran from. Inside the cabin, warmth lived in the walls, not just from the humming heat core or the flickering fire, but from the routine of things, from footsteps, from idle humming, from the way. Matsari stirred stew with one hand while brushing Tiva's hair back with the other. From the way Cello sat near the hearth, carving small figures into wood scraps, like each one might be a promise made solid. Elrich moved among them now, without feeling like a shadow. He repaired things that didn't need fixing, checked seals that were already tight, not because the cabin demanded it, but because he didn't know what else to do with his hands when he wasn't holding grief. That morning, Cello had handed him a new carving, his most careful yet. A small figure, thick-shouldered, standing. Tall. It had a faint scratch running down the left cheek. Elrich stared at it for a long moment before saying anything. That's me? Cello nodded once. It's got your face line. Elrich looked at the boy, who tried to play it cool, but clearly wanted him to keep it. He closed his fingers around the little wooden statue. Thanks. Tiva, meanwhile, had invented a game where her doll dressed in the infamous thermal sock needed. Soup lessons. She followed Elrich to the cooking pot with great seriousness, requesting he teach her how to make the flavor that fixes sad bellies. You put in salt first, she said wisely, then the warmth, then the love. Where do I find love? Elrich asked, amused. She tapped her chest. Right here. But don't use it all, or your heart will fall out. Matsari chuckled from across the room. A sound was easy now. Natural. After lunch, while the children napped in a bundle of shared blankets, Matsari joined Elrich near the window. They sat side by side, their shoulders just brushing. Beyond the frost-blurred glass, the snow shimmered like powdered light. Shadows had returned to the land. The sun was trying again. Matsari was quiet for a while, then said, Do you miss it? He turned to her, confused. The war, she clarified. The movement, the urgency. He shook his head. I miss the people, not the chaos. She nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. I used to miss being needed. Now I just want to be chosen. Elrich turned his head toward her. That statement hit harder than he expected. You are, he said. Her eyes met his. They didn't need to say anything more. That evening, they gathered near the heater again. Tiva was the first to fall asleep, curled against Matsari's side with her doll under her chin. Cello sat against Elrich's leg, half listening as the old soldier read from a beat-up manual repurposed into a bedtime story. Most of the words meant little to the boy, but the voice, the rhythm, the quiet companionship meant everything. When the children were finally asleep, Elrich rose to bank the fire and dim the lights. Matsari remained on the floor, arms wrapped around her knees. "You didn't ask me anything today," she murmured. "Didn't need to," he replied. "Some days are better quiet." She nodded. "It was a good day," she said. "It was. Not because anything grand had happened, but because nothing had. No alarms, no escapes, no trade, no begging. No proving just warmth. Just breath. Just the ordinary miracle of peace. Elrich stood at the edge of the sleeping area, hesitating for the first time in days. Matsari met his gaze from the floor. He didn't say anything, just pulled back one side of the blanket and stepped aside. She rose slowly, crossed the floor in silence, and slipped beneath the covers. This time, she didn't face the wall. She faced him. Her hand found his beneath the blanket. She didn't squeeze. She didn't pull. She simply rested there, curled into his palm, as if anchoring herself to something steady. He watched her in the dim light for a long moment, and when her eyes closed and her breath slowed, Elrich, finally, let himself believe what he hadn't dared to before. This wasn't survival anymore. It was life. It wasn't a transaction. It was choice. And when he closed his eyes, his last thought was not of Lyra's grave, or the war, or the silence he had buried himself in. It was of her voice, just hours earlier, whispering, "Now I just want to be chosen." And the fact that she had chosen him, that was enough. The snow had begun to recede, not quickly, not dramatically, but in quiet increments. The frozen world of Veltuan 5 no longer looked endless. There were shapes now beyond the windows. Hints of slope and shadow, dark stones peeking through drifts like memories returning to the surface. Life, impossibly, was beginning to show behind. The cabin, in what Elrich had once called the scrap field, something new had taken root. A garden, or the start of one. Just a narrow patch of thawed soil, fenced in with broken solar panel frames and old heater grates. It had begun with 3 half-expired seed packets Matsari found sealed in an emergency crate. Cello had cleared the stones. Elrich tilled the earth by hand, and Tiva named every seedling like they were pets. Under the pale light of Velchuan's cautious sun, the plants had bloomed. Fat, curling firefruit, sharp-leaf greens, the purple-stalked twistweed that tasted better than it smelled. It was still modest, but it was alive. That afternoon, the 4 of them were in the garden, dirt under their nails, sunlight on their backs. Pull from the base, Elrich instructed as Tiva struggled with the stubborn fruit. If you yank the top, you'll snap the stalk, she grunted, tongue poking from the corner of her mouth. Like this? Twist first, then pull, he said. Like when I open your toolbox. Oh, like when the blue one fizzed. That, Matsari called from across the plot, arms full of greens, was a plasma cell, not a fruit. And you were told not to touch it. She was helping, Cello defended, holding up a cluster of herbs. We were exploring. You nearly disabled the entire power grid. But we fixed it, he said, flashing a rare, smug grin. Elrich shook his head, but his mouth twitched. Matsari met his gaze across the garden, and the expression on her face made him stop. She was smiling. Not a guarded twitch of the lips, not a reaction to a joke, but a full, open smile, bright and mischievous, framed by her undone braid and the sunlight slipping through strands of white hair. She looked like someone who belonged here. Maybe, Elrich thought. She always had by midday. The harvest was done. They sat on the cabin steps, children between them, each holding a fresh-cut piece of fruit. Tiva leaned against Elrich's side, barefoot and content, legs streaked with dirt. Cello carved a curved blade of wood, his carving knife tucked in his belt like a badge of honor. The moment was quiet. Easy. It almost passed without notice. But Tiva leaned her head against Elrich's arm, looked up at him, and said it like it was nothing at all. Papa. Elrich froze. Beside him, Matsari's head turned. Her lips parted, but she didn't interrupt. Tiva held up her fruit-stained hand. I think this one's for you. He took it. Swallowed hard. You're my papa now, right? Elrich looked at Matsari. She was watching him. Not with caution. Not with fear, not with quiet hope. He nodded slowly. If you want me to be? Tiva smiled, satisfied. I already did. Cello didn't look up from his carving. I've been calling you that in my head for a while, he said. Didn't know if I was allowed to. You don't need permission, Elrich replied. Then it's settled, Cello said. And that was that. Asterisk. Not with ceremony. Not with some dramatic declaration. Just with dirt under their nails. And sun on their faces. And the weight of the past, finally light enough to breathe under. Later, the children ran inside to wash up arguing over who would get the last of the dried fruit. Elrich and Matsari remained on the steps, sitting in the silence they now shared easily. Above them, the clouds drifted in lazy circles, the sky tinged with the softest shade of blue. You always imagine it like this? Matsari asked, head resting lightly on his shoulder. He thought about it, then shook his head. I didn't imagine it at all. I never let myself. She smiled faintly. And now? Now I don't have to. He turned his head and kissed her. Temple, gently. She closed her eyes and let herself lean into him fully. For the first time in years, there were no weapons within reach. No alarm set. No boots by the door ready for a midnight escape. Just her breath against his arm. The sound of children laughing inside. A woman who had survived hell, now smiling at the sound of her daughter calling someone Papa. And a man who had once been a soldier, once been alone in silence and frost, now rooted in something that had taken months to bloom, but bloomed just the same. Family. Not bought. Not begged. But built. It hadn't come from war or blood. It had grown from shared. Quiet. And now it was spring. Asterisk.